Welcome to Who Yelling Now, Season 4. The theme for this season will be based on this question. Is the past a commodity that can be sold to the highest bidder? This is episode 1, titled The Auction Begins. Friends, there's a moment that happens after someone dies that no one really talks about. It's not the funeral. It's not the obituary. It's not even the silence afterwards. It's the moment when people begin deciding what the story will be. Not what happened, not what mattered most, but what version of the past will survive. I've seen this moment more than once. A body goes still, and suddenly a life becomes adjustable. Details get highlighted. Edges get smooth. Entire chapters quietly disappear. Not out of cruelty, out of comfort. And everyone agrees, without saying it out loud, that this is what respect looks like. But I've always wondered, at what point does remembering turn into editing? And who decides when a life becomes a story instead of a truth? Let me share a story I call Death Beginning. The morning Tammy's aunt died, the house was full. Not loud, just busy. Coffee cups on the counter, shoes by the door. The long hum of people moving around, not trying to look directly at the bedroom where their loved one laid in her final moments. She had been fading for days. The kind of fading where everyone knows what's coming, but no one wants to be the one who stays for it. About 15 minutes before it happened, someone said, "Let's go to McDonald's and get breakfast." It was said lightly, casually, as if hunger had suddenly become urgent. Everyone agreed. Coats were grabbed, keys jingled. A decision made quickly enough that no one had to feel guilty about it. Tammy quietly said, "I'll stay." Not sure why she said it, not knowing why. Maybe no appetite really. There was no speech in her head before the words were uttered. I'll stay. No sense of duty. Just a feeling that if everyone left, something would be abandoned. So she stayed. The room was dim. The curtains barely open. That thin morning light that makes everything looks unfinished poured into her aunt's room. Her aunt was breathing, but not evenly. Each breath sounded like a question the body was tired of asking. Tammy sat near the bed, not holding her hand, just close enough to know she was there. And then it happened. Quietly. No announcement. No dramatic moment. Just a last breath that didn't return. No one else saw it. No one else heard the room settle into stillness. So that moment, that crossing, became hers alone. Tammy's solitary death moment with her aunt. Not because she wanted it, but because she was there. When everyone came back, they came back holding paper bags. The smell of bacon filled the house too quickly. And almost immediately, the talking started. Stories. People remembered her. Mildred, Tammy's aunt. Her name was spoken out aloud over and over again, as if memory needed witnesses to be real. They spoke about her like we hadn't all known her all our lives. They spoke and introduced her again and again to everyone that was already there, relatives, loved ones, like they were introducing her to the room. Then the sorting began. Drawers were open, closets checked, frames lifted from walls. Degrees she worked years for, framed, then stacked, then placed gently into boxes. Achievements reduced to objects. Objects reduced to decisions. Who want this? Who should take that? And Tammy watched something disappear that no one noticed was leaving. Her story. Mildred's story. Mildred's real life story. Not the version that comforts a room. The morning after death. The real one. The one that didn't fit breakfast conversations. The younger ones of the family that didn't really know her. How could they have known how much Mildred loved dancing to reggae music? So they were given a version of Mildred. A story shaped for the moment, for the year, for what society could tolerate hearing. Not the world she lived in, the world she was allowed to die in. And that's when Tammy understood something she didn't have language for yet. This is how the past stops being inherited and starts being sold. Not for money, for peace, for convenience, for cohesion. And once a story is told enough times, it hardens. It becomes the truth people repeat without remembering that it was chosen. The past didn't disappear that morning. It was negotiated by her loved ones. Here is a poem titled Last Statement. Should we be allowed to say who we are before we die? Even if the statement is a fantasy, even if it smooths the damage, even if it edits the ache, even if it tells the story the way we wish it had been. If the living are going to rewrite us anyway, shouldn't we get first draft? Shouldn't we be allowed to leave a version behind that protects us from the way we will be remembered? Or is that just another lie the living will correct once the body can't object? Because maybe fantasy isn't escape. Maybe it's rehearsal. Maybe it's self trying to survive the story others will sell. Fellow yellers, my friends, what happened in that room, what Tammy experienced, wasn't unique. We do this everywhere. We like to think of history as fixed, as if it simply exists. But history doesn't survive on truth. It survives on permission. Someone decides what gets remembered, what gets simplified, what gets archived, what gets framed, what gets quietly removed. Museums don't just collect artifacts, they curate narratives. Textbooks don't just record facts, they allocate space. Platforms don't just share information, they reward certain versions of it. And slowly, without ceremony, the past begins to behave like property, owned, managed, protected. Some stories become priceless, others become inconvenient. And here's the part we avoid naming. The more public a story becomes, the safer it has to be. So, truths aren't erased. They're softened, balanced, contextualized, presented in ways that educate without interrupting anything. This is how truth survives while losing its ability to change outcomes. And once that happens, the question is no longer, what happened? It becomes, what version can live the longest without disturbing the room? Because memory costs something. Preservation costs something. Forgetting, on the other hand, is cheap. That's when the auction begins. So, let's speak poetically. Let's call this poem market value. They asked for proof, but not the kind that bleeds. They asked for sources, but not witnesses. They asked for balance because truth was too heavy to hold by itself. So they priced the past by comfort, by audience, by what wouldn't disturb the almighty room. And when the numbers didn't add up, they called it progress. Friends, nothing disappears. It just changes owners. Here's the question we avoid. What happens to the truth once it enters the market? Because markets don't protect meaning. They optimize circulation. And circulation doesn't care about consequences. A truth that travels widely but changes nothing has already failed. It can inform. It can educate. It can be shared. But it cannot interrupt. And interruption is what truth is supposed to do. This season isn't about lies. Lies are loud. This season is about truth that survived and still didn't matter. Truth that was known, archived, repeated, and politely ignored. So, if the past can be sold, who sets the price? And what happens to the parts no one wants to carry forward? Because once you see it, done to one person, you can't unsee it. Because if a life can be edited, so can a family. If a family can be reframed, so can a people. If a people can be narrated, so can a state. And if a state can be remembered selectively, so can a country. Empires already know this. They didn't rise on the truth. They rose on stories that outlived the bodies that built them. Stories polished enough to survive the collapse. And sometimes I wonder, not loudly, not completely, what happens when the same thing is done to an entire civilization? When memory is curated at a planetary scale, when errors are simplified, when harm is archived, when consequence is delayed long enough to be called progress. I'm not saying that's happening. I'm just saying, once you've watched it happen in a room, at a bedside, over a body that can no longer object, you start to recognize the pattern. If the past can be sold, it doesn't stop with individuals. And if truth has a market value, someone will always be deciding what survives. That's the thought I'll leave you with, my friends. Because when everything is owned, something else always follows. Not explanation, not education, refusal. And we are going to talk about it. So, tune in. Stay with me through season 4. This has been Who Yelling Now? Welcome, and I will see you in the next episode.